Valentín Barco appears to be just on the cusp of making the Chelsea move official.
The Premier League isn't ready for Chelsea's new signing Valentín Barco. And that's not hype, that's a problem most teams haven't solved yet. Because on paper, he looks simple, a 21-year-old left-back coming from Strasbourg. But this is a player who has already played as a winger, a fullback, a central midfielder, and even a number 10, and somehow made it all work. At Boca Juniors, he debuted at 16, and by 19 he was starting a Copa Libertadores final, not as a safe defender, but as one of their main creative outlets, putting up 7.3 crosses per 90, 4.8 shot-creating actions, and 5.3 dribbles per game in that run. Then came Europe, and everything slowed down. Brighton didn't fully unlock him, Sevilla didn't either, but at Strasbourg something changed. This season, he's not just playing, he's controlling games. 24 league appearances, 4 assists, a European campaign with 7 games, 1 goal, and over 86% passing accuracy. But more importantly, he's no longer playing like a fullback. He's drifting inside, carrying through pressure, creating from midfield, and turning into one of the most unpredictable left-sided players in Europe right now. And now Chelsea are moving for him, not because he fits a position, but because he breaks them. So the real question isn't whether Valentín Barco is talented, it's whether the Premier League is ready for a player who doesn't play by its rules. This is why the Premier League might not be ready for Valentín Barco at all. Chelsea are signing a player most people still haven't properly identified, and honestly, that's kind of the point. The easy version of Valentín Barco is a quick 3-second bio. Young, Argentine, left-sided, technical, exciting. Tick the boxes, move on. But the accurate version, that's a much more interesting story, and it tells you a lot about why this transfer is flying completely under the radar. As of April 6th, 2026, the strongest reporting says Barco has already said yes to Chelsea. The player side of the move is agreed. Chelsea are now in control of whether and when to complete the Strasburg deal. This isn't being framed as a maybe anymore. This is being framed like Chelsea have already positioned the board and Barco is ready to step onto it. And that's exactly why this move is flying completely under the radar. He's not arriving with a £70 million fee attached. He's not the headline striker everyone's been debating. He's not the superstar name casual fans have an opinion on. But those are usually the transfers people understand too quickly. Barco is harder to read, and that's precisely what makes him so interesting. When Brighton signed him in January 2024, the Premier League's own description was already unusual. A 19-year-old who could play at left-back or as a winger, with Brighton's technical view going even further, noting he'd shown versatility across midfield too. That is not normal scouting language for a left-back. That's a warning that this player doesn't fit cleanly into one box. So when people say Chelsea are signing a defender, that's only partly true. When people say they're signing a midfielder, also only partly true. And when people say he's just another academy talent passing through the Blueco pipeline, that misses the point entirely. Here's why. In his final Boca Juniors period, 33% of his league minutes came as a left winger, 32% as a fullback or wide midfielder, 22% as a central midfielder, and 13% as a number 10. That's not random utility. That's a player whose game was already breaking positional labels before most people had even properly watched him. Even during his brief Brighton exposure, in a 45-minute cameo against Chelsea, he had 70 touches and kept trying to feed the box or switch play across the pitch. Small sample, but it tells you something immediately. He doesn't wait for the game to define his role. He starts bending the structure himself. Which brings us to the part of the story most people outside South America completely missed. Valentín Barco was never a normal wonder kid. He made his Boca Juniors debut at 16 in 2021. By the time Brighton bought him, he'd already made 35 first-team appearances for one of the biggest clubs on the continent. But what really revealed everything wasn't just how early he played, it was how early he looked comfortable doing creative things under genuine pressure. Then came the 2023 Copa Libertadores, and this is where the player starts making complete sense. Boca reached the final, and Barco wasn't some protected academy story being kept away from the big nights. He was a real part of the run. He played the 8th most minutes of any Boca player in that entire Libertadores campaign. He was the youngest player in the squad. He started both the semi-final and the final. At 19 years and 104 days, he became the youngest player to start a Copa Libertadores final since Ever Banega in 2007 in a 2-1 extra-time defeat Fluminense at the Maracana, one of the most iconic stadiums in world football. Starting as a teenager. And the numbers from that run tell you even more than the occasion. In the Libertadores, Barco led Boca for crosses per 90 at 7.3, for shot-creating actions per 90 at 4.8, and for dribbles per game at 5.3. He won 26 fouls, more than every player in the tournament except one, while still averaging more than 3 tackles plus interceptions per game. Those are not the numbers of a cautious teenage fullback playing safe passes and staying in their lane. Those are the numbers of a young player already behaving like a creator, receiving under pressure, dribbling at defenders, provoking contact, and taking attacking responsibility in advanced areas. That's the part people miss when they hear left back. They immediately imagine the wrong kind of footballer. Barco was already showing, before Brighton, before Strasburg, and long before Chelsea, that he was not built to be a touchline defender who recycles possession and waits for instructions. He wanted the difficult pass, the risky carry, the ball in tight spaces, the attacking action that changed the entire rhythm of a move. Brighton's internal view described him as technically mature beyond his years. Their scouting comparison pointed to the kind of young Argentine whose final third quality makes you stop and rewind the clip because you genuinely can't figure out how he saw that pass in the first place. So no, Chelsea aren't just buying another young player from Strasbourg. They're moving for a footballer whose profile has confused people from the very beginning because he never really played like the position written next to his name. A lot of fans think they know what Chelsea are getting, a promising left-back, a useful squad option, maybe a project, but that's too small. What Chelsea are actually getting is a player who, even as a teenager at Boca Juniors in Copa Libertadores finals under genuine pressure, was already playing the game like a left-sided creator. And that is a very different thing entirely. Here's the part of Valentín Barco's story that most people skip, the part that didn't work. Because if you only tell this as a clean, linear rise from Boca to Chelsea, young talent, smooth progression, dream move, you miss the entire point. The messy middle is where this story actually gets interesting, and frankly, is where Barco became the player Chelsea are now chasing. He left Boca for Brighton in January 2024. On paper, perfect modern move. Young, technical, left-sided, high ceiling, landing in exactly the right environment. But football is never that tidy, and Brighton's own staff were already giving clues about the complication, describing him as versatile enough to play left-back, winger and across midfield. That versatility was exciting. It was also part of the problem, because he arrived in England as a player with obvious talent and no fully settled identity, and in one of the most tactically demanding systems in the Premier League, where fullbacks had to push high, step in field, create overloads and maintain precise circulation, raw and unfinished gets exposed quickly. Brighton's analytics flagged his pass accuracy at around 74%, well below their team average. His defensive output, interceptions, blocks, clearances, aerial duels was below fullback averages too. The talent was obvious, the incompleteness was equally obvious. This wasn't a finished left-back arriving to compete immediately, this was a gifted multi-positional footballer arriving in one of the most demanding ecosystems in English football and not quite being ready for it yet. So the appearances stayed limited. 7 appearances in all competitions. His Premier League debut came against Liverpool in March 2024. Baptism of fire doesn't begin to cover it. There were flashes, moments where he'd invert into central areas, switch play, try to shape the rhythm of attacks rather than just support from the outside. Even in a cameo against Chelsea, he was active enough to show what makes him unusual, drifting between zones, always looking forward, always trying to change something. But flashes aren't breakthroughs, and Brighton eventually chose development over patience. First destination, Sevilla. August 2024, Fabian Herzler described it as a chance to get minutes with one of the top clubs in Spain in a very competitive environment. Sounds promising. The reality was considerably quieter. 7 appearances before the move effectively stalled. Brighton changed course again in February 2025, redirecting him to Strasbourg instead. That second redirection is significant because it tells you Brighton knew the first loan hadn't unlocked anything. Sevilla gave him another prestigious address. Strasbourg gave him something far more valuable, a footballing purpose. And this is where the story finally shifts. Strasbourg initially used him as a wing-back and at times as an inverted midfielder, bringing what their coverage described as energy, flair and feistiness, and he quickly became a fan favourite because Strasbourg didn't buy him because they saw a conventional defender. They bought him because they looked at his profile and understood something others had missed. His best qualities became more obvious the closer he moved to the middle of the pitch. That was the real turning point. League One's official analysis describes Barco's evolution in Alsace as a transformation from an adventurous fullback into one of League One's most inventive young midfielders under Liam Rosenior. And that wording matters enormously, because this wasn't a left-back occasionally stepping inside for fun, this was a player being reinterpreted. Strasburger used aggressive shapes, 3-4-3 and 4-3-2-1, asking Barco to drift infield, combine in midfield, link with inside forwards and break lines rather than simply run the flank. Strasburger were also built on pressing high, drawing teams out and accelerating through the spaces created, the highest share in the league of passes that broke opposition attacking lines, one of the highest counter-attacking outputs in the division. In that environment, a player like Barco becomes very hard to classify and even harder to contain. And this positional shift wasn't random or invented from nothing. Remember those Boca Juniors numbers? 33% left-winger, 32% fullback or wide midfielder, 22% central midfielder, 13% number 10. When Strasbourg pushed him inward, they weren't building a new player, they were formalising traits that had always been there. He'd always wanted the ball at different heights, in different lanes, with different responsibilities. The difference was that Strasbourg stopped treating that as useful versatility and started treating it as the core of his game. And once that happened, the production followed. By January 2026, League One's half-season review called him one of Strasbourg's top players, an all-action midfielder whose composure and versatility had made him integral to their push for Europe. 24 league appearances, 4 goals, 4 assists. In Europe, 7 Conference League appearances, 1 goal, 81.65% passing accuracy. And that goal wasn't decorative either. It was the equaliser against Rijeka that sent Strasbourg into their first major European quarter-final since 1980. Contribution with weight, not just contribution with numbers. The match examples tell the story even more clearly. Against PSG in a 3-3 draw in October 2025, League One highlighted his composure under pressure and his chemistry with Panicelli and Moreira, specifically pointing to the second Strasbourg goal, where Barco's calm led to a chipped assist. Against Rijeka in Europe, he played the long pass that launched the move for Strasbourg's early opener in the first leg, then scored the decisive goal in the return leg. These aren't actions of a player hiding in the structure, these are actions of a player influencing phases, receiving, connecting, carrying and deciding. So here's the honest truth about the Brighton chapter. It failed, but it failed usefully. It exposed the raw parts of his game, the physical adaptation, the defensive looseness, the turnovers, the fact that talent alone wasn't enough to survive yet. Sevilla didn't solve that, Strasbourg did. Not by simplifying him, but by understanding him. They moved him closer to the zones where his best qualities actually matter. The half spaces, the central pockets, the moments between build-up and final third creation. That's why Barco's versatility isn't a sign that he's unfinished, it's a sign that his game is genuinely multi-dimensional, and once Strasbourg stopped asking him to behave like a normal fullback, his career stopped looking like a stalled project and started looking like a serious footballing idea. Chelsea aren't inheriting the Brighton version still trying to find his feet in English football. They're tracking the Strasbourg version that finally understood what he is, not a left-back who can do a bit more, but a left-sided creator who can start anywhere and change the shape of a game from inside it.
Here's what most people miss about Barco. He doesn't just express himself, he has tempo. He can slow a phase down, draw pressure in, wait for the lane to open, then accelerate the whole attack with one carry or one pass. Most players move the ball, Barco moves the moment. Then there's the chaos factor. He can start wide like a fullback, appear inside like a midfielder, then combine higher like a number 10. Defensive systems are built on reference points. Barco muddies all three simultaneously. When defenders hesitate even half a second, the press breaks, the lane opens, the attack goes through it. Brighton's own background piece compared him explicitly to an early Gareth Bale, not the Real Madrid version, the earlier one, explosive, left-sided, technically brave, capable of overwhelming games from a wide zone. But Barco's evolution has added something more. He's now closer to a modern inverted playmaker, starting left, solving the game from inside. Now the honest part. Pass accuracy around 74% at Brighton, defensive numbers below fullback average, dispossessed 18 times in the Boca Libertadores campaign, most of any player in the squad. The weaknesses are real, but they tell you exactly how not to use him. Don't ask him to win headers and defend channels, that shrinks the wrong part of the player. His value lives in half spaces, tight combinations, and creative decisions under pressure. Chelsea's 4-2-3-1, central overloads, press baiting, forward passes through the spine is exactly the environment where his profile becomes a genuine problem for opponents. They're not signing a position, they're signing a left-sided solution to multiple attacking problems. And that's why the Premier League might not be ready. Defenders hate uncertainty. Players who drift inside unexpectedly, receive in the half space, and force decisions nobody wanted to make. Barco's danger isn't fitting one role brilliantly, it's constantly changing the picture. The real question isn't whether he's talented enough, that's settled. The real question is whether Chelsea will use him correctly. Because if they get this right, they're not just signing a player, they're introducing a profile the Premier League still doesn't fully understand.